Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Hot Button. Every episode we're getting a little bit and more hot. I would say the topics get hotter and hotter. We figured we would kind of plan this way to like ease into it.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about modesty, which is definitely can be triggering. Mm-hmm. So I do want to say this before we even start the episode. This should not bring shame, condemnation to anyone. That is never our heart. Our goal with all of these is just to ask yourself questions about a topic. Mm-hmm. Why do I believe what I believe? Have I thought about this aspect in my life? Or have I just not even been aware? Mm-hmm. So that's always the heart and the goal of this. Mm-hmm. And some things might be confronting and maybe a little convicting, and that's, something to take to the Holy Spirit. Right. But that's always our heart with these, is to never bring shame and condemnation, because some of them can be touchy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so modesty, first question is, what is it? I have our dictionary definition of what modesty is.
Webster's dictionary.
Modesty is the quality of not being too proud or confident about yourself or abilities, propriety in dress, speech, or conduct.
That's good.
Is like the dictionary definition.
So what do you think your generation thinks modesty means?
I think modesty
is very different than ours, for sure.
Yeah, I think modesty, everybody always thinks of clothing.
Okay.
Most likely. And modesty equals covered from like your neck to your ankles. Like Amish people or whatever. And that's what modest is.
Because that definition is different for each person, right? The way that it's worded. Mm-hmm. And so I think in culture, modesty, this day and age can mean like, oh, you have to dress like a nun, or Victorian era, like you talked about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that modesty is, like we talked about before, is a reflection of your own conviction and how you present yourself based on how you were raised and the culture you live in. Mm-hmm. And it can be on the toxic side if you're getting all of that from social media and TV and Hollywood and you're buying into the marketing, right? That sex sells, and people, I think, lose sight of that's a marketing ploy.
Mm. Yeah, very much so.
You're getting inundated with these images because of the sales aspect and dollar signs, and that it's not a good place to find your definition of modesty or your personal conviction about how you should dress and how you should carry yourself in general. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of think this modesty, people's definition is obviously very different. Everybody can define it very differently. I think it always goes back down to the heart. What is the true motive? People are going to see what modesty looks like in you. It's going to show up.
Yep.
And it really boils down to the heart at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So I know for our generation, there were certain things that were really hip and wonderful, and things that we didn't that I could not even purchase clothes and things like that during that period of time. Mm-hmm. But the reality is I was taught to be confident in who I was. And so that's just something that's lost, though, I think, in today's just social media aspect, is no one really talks about what modesty really is. Mm-hmm. It's not defined very clearly, honestly.
And I think it's very intertwined with confidence, because at least growing up, the perception to me in my culture was less clothes equals proving I'm confident. So a lot of people would say, I dress like this because I'm confident, or to show it's like a proving.
Got it.
If you're confident, you'll have less clothing on, essentially. And so those two things, I think, have been very closely intertwined for some reason. And I think that's honestly the root of what's internally in everybody is,
But don't you think that's just the ploy, right? Isn't 100%. That just a lie? It's we're talking about it today. We can see clearly that it's a lie, but it is easy to get trapped into that. Yeah,
you don't recognize that's what's happening.
You don't.
I think until you stop and think about, what is confidence? What does that mean? And then we just looked up the definition of confidence. It's always interesting. You think you have your own definition
I know.
Of words.
Right.
But then you never stop to think of what it actually means, and you all of a sudden get like a new revelation. So confidence means the state of feeling certain about the truth of something.
Wow.
Oh, that's so good.
So good.
Yeah. And so I think that confidence, the flip side of that is insecurity. So a lot of girls are trying to dress to deal with insecurity, whether it's deep seated or not. We're all dealing with it all the time. How do I look? Do I look fat in this dress? It can be a swimsuit or any kind of clothing, but we're all dealing with it. But I think the younger ones obviously deal with it more. And I think as you get older, you find your confidence in different things, obviously just by being on the planet longer.
Yeah.
But it's still not that people our age don't struggle with these deep-seated insecurities and have body dysmorphia and all that. Of course they do.
Yeah.
But overall, we're seeing this pattern of younger girls being influenced more and more by social media and the feedback they're getting there, and maybe not hearing the biblical side of it or what their parents think or what their culture, their church culture has to say about it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to, like you said, deal with the inner heart. Like, what are you trying to communicate to the world? But also that we try to cover our brothers in Christ and be sensitive to their struggles, because we know there's a portion of the population that struggles with porn, that struggles with sexual inappropriateness. And so if we know that if we're at a pool party and a percentage of people are struggling with that, then it is our responsibility to take on some sensitivity at whatever level we personally feel convicted of. So it's still ambiguous based on the person, but I think we can't lose the sight of the fact that men are stimulated visually and that we can be, causing our brothers to stumble.
Yeah, and I think this is probably the most controversial point when we talk about this topic is women with men. And this is why we also wanted to do this, because I think the church has had a hard time. They go like two extremes. Cover up yourself because you're going to cause someone to stumble and it's your fault, and they blame the women for men's sin, which is
totally
not what we're communicating. And the other side of they need to control themselves, and whatever I do doesn't matter, so I can be completely insensitive to the other people around me. And there is something in the middle where both people do have mutual responsibility and need to be sensitive to one another.
Right. And I don't think we should be reacting to either side. If you find yourself reacting,
that's good.
You need to do a heart check and figure your stuff out, because it's not about reacting to what people say. If you're feeling judged or whatever, there are judgy people, there are judgy Christians, and you're going to have to deal with that. That's a whole nother topic. We did
talk about that.
Unfortunately, that is a big part of Christianity, and that's probably the most painful part of Christianity to me, is just like seeing other people judge, and that causes people to shut down and maybe even go the opposite direction. So having sensitive conversations with people you have influence over is a much better route than like publicly degrading someone for how inappropriately they're dressed in public. That's not okay.
Yeah, never. We would never condone that. But we do have a culture as Christians. We are called to be set apart.
Absolutely.
And even like in our first episode, we talked about giving a rebuke and judgment and all that kind of stuff of when you're in a close-knit community, I would confront a friend. Hey, how are you doing? I've noticed this about you that's changed. Are you doing okay? Right? That's appropriate. Not some stranger on the street. You shouldn't go up to some little teenager in the mall and go, your butt's hanging out of your shorts. That's so inappropriate. Like, what's that girl gonna think? Like, that's not helpful.
Well, because you're describing relational connectivity. You can be able to challenge, encourage, and bring people and call them to a higher place if you have relational connection. And if you don't have relational connection, I mean, social media, obviously people feel very free to spout their opinions and their beliefs and ideas on social media, but that's not going to change somebody's heart. Relational connection and bringing them, calling somebody to a higher place is going to change somebody's heart. So at the end of the day, that's what we're called to.
100%. Yeah. And I think for one thing, women, we get so focused on, because we even talked about this, it's almost like we're in competition with each other. Like, guys don't notice if your nails are done or not. Not really. But your friend is going to notice. And so I think sometimes we get lost in our own women's world because we don't think like men. And so I would say that looks really cute. But a guy may perceive it differently or be struggling with something, and we don't honestly pay attention to what the guys are thinking at all. Which I think is just a revelation for me, and I think for a lot of people, is putting myself in the other person's shoes and being conscious of that it is a struggle for some guys, especially like what you mentioned, like the rate of pornography is very rampant in this country.
And with men and women. I mean, if you think about the increase of women,
100%.
So.
And so it's, do I want to be in a room where I'm causing someone to struggle? it's for anything even.
Sure.
What I want, if I know my friend's an alcoholic,
Right.
well, it's their job to manage themselves. I can drink all day. It's not a problem for me. It's their problem. Well, what I want to create an environment where that person's going to struggle.
Yeah.
That's not being kind.
Right.
That's not loving the other person and putting their needs before my own.
Yeah, and creating a stumbling block.
And is it really that hard to not drink?
Right.
Not really. Is it really that hard just to maybe not wear that? You know?
That's good.
At the end of the day.
That's really
Definitely.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's also important to, in addition to being aware of your own heart and what you're trying to portray and how you dress, it's important to self-reflect on what are you trying to attract. And I think sometimes younger women maybe not aware that they're attracting a certain kind of guy, that if they're scantily clad, and then that guy may be prone to looking at that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so is that the person that you're really trying to attract? And even if, I don't want to categorize everybody and lump them in, but you're going to have to deal with the percentage of filtering that out.
You are.
Yep.
You're going to cause a lot of work
Right.
for yourself because, and you may be caught off guard by some deception even of guys that are preying and are predatory and narcissistic, and and they're kind of coming in and you don't realize. So anyway, there's just a whole lot to like, what are you trying to attract? Be very careful, like when you're making these choices of what you're inviting into your world.
That's good.
For sure. It's kind of like I mentioned it earlier, but would you rather a guy say, the first thing I noticed when I walked in the room was how big her butt was.
Right.
And that's what I was attracted to immediately. Or a guy that's like, I walked in and your confidence and the way you smiled was the first thing I was attracted to. And so I had to come and meet and talk to you.
That's a good point. That's really good.
What are you leading as far as your presentation? Am I leading with my personality and my confidence, or am I leading with just my surface appearance?
Right. Exactly.
Because that stuff is very fleeting.
It's very temporary.
And it lasts for a second and then, moves on to the next thing.
I agree. And there are many icons that we can look at that are more classic, that to like Audrey Hepburn, I don't know,
Kelly.
like Grace, or even modern day. I mean, I can't think of any right now. Maybe Nicole Kidman. I don't know. She probably has some bad photos out there too. I don't know.
okay.
But
I don't know.
anyway, when you see a classy, sophisticated woman who's confident in the way she dresses, and she and then you notice her style, not her cleavage,
Right.
Right. And you're like, oh, I like that dress. I wonder if I can find something in my price range like that. Yeah,
Exactly.
Because it's not a bad thing to want to be fashionable, to feel beautiful, to enjoy clothing and makeup.
No.
It's not; those are not bad
No,
things.
not
Of
at
course,
all.
all things can be tainted and over obsessed.
100%.
Like we can be obsessed with makeup, we can be obsessed with our bodies in a good or a bad way. We can. Of course, there are all kinds of variations in between. But I mean, overall, it does seem like the way someone dressed communicates something.
It does.
And if there's a complexity, I'm intrigued by complexity. Like the sophisticated woman is more complex, and I'm more intrigued by that.
Yeah.
And it is important to kind of talk about these things because younger girls may have never thought about this.
Because I didn't as a kid. You're just looking at what other people are wearing, and this is what you wear, and this is what's in the store, so you go for it. And it's the same for guys, too. Girls do this with guys. When a guy walks in the room, if he wears a T-shirt that looks like he's been wearing it for 4 days and some shorts and flip-flops, you immediately have a perception of who that person is and what they do.
Yeah.
100%. It doesn't matter. You're judged on first impressions.
Right.
So versus a guy who's got a nice shirt on with some nice, looks like he put thought and effort, you immediately, your perception of that person, even though it's all assumption and we shouldn't assume, you assume better things about that person.
Yeah.
And guys do the same thing, and women do the same thing to each other too. You look at someone, that first appearance, and what's leading.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Lawrence and I have talked about this in the past. It's always, guys tend to, and I'm not a guy, but he's communicated, they tend to want mystery. They don't want to see everything. It's a way more attractive to see a woman and pursue her for who she is, and to be surprised and excited about what you don't see versus just having everything hanging out there. I mean, there's just no mystery involved. And I think we've kind of missed the art of mystery in this culture that women want to be pursued for who they are.
They do.
And not necessarily the body. They want to be attractive. You know,
sure.
They want their husband or their boyfriend to think they're attractive, but they really want to be pursued. Honestly, if you really drill down to the heart
100%.
of every woman, we want to be desired for who we are inside and pursued in that way. And I think guys really, if you really ask, they really want the
that.
mystery.
Yeah, and like I said before, along that line, like we can't really criticize men for being misogynistic, sexual pigs, while at the same time dressing to bring out those qualities in culture.
Like exactly.
In general. Yeah, I mean, just think about it. Like, what are you inviting? Like, what are you
encouraging?
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's for both men and women, is what are you encouraging in each other? And because you're bringing that out. So I can't, it's kind of like what you said, be dressing a certain way that invites that type of attention, then get mad when I get that.
Right.
Versus calling out what I do want. If I want someone who's going to value me for my intellect and my personality and my ethics and my character, that's what I need to put out first.
Right.
To draw that in.
Right. But there's modesty in it's not just clothes. It's
100%.
modesty in the way you speak, right? And your language, and modesty in your behavior. I mean, there's just so many ways that modesty can come forth. It really is, modesty is the character that is presented in front of people. And then what are people seeing, and are they seeing somebody that is confident, that knows who they are, and what is their worship towards the Lord look like? Because really you show up, modesty shows up in your character and worship.
Yep.
And like you said earlier, we have to, we're called to make sacrifices. And in our culture, we die to self daily. And so there may be a party you don't go to because you know that there's going to be drugs there. Well, the same like for the modesty factor. Are there topless people there?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
good question.
We went to some beaches in Europe that were topless, and it's like, and it's hard to find some in certain areas that aren't.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, and it is a different culture because even the old heavy women go to, it's not to be sexy.
Right.
They're just wanting to sun. Like that's their culture. They've been brought up that way. And so they want the suntan or whatever, and without the lines. And it's like pretty shocking to us because we have never grown. And so it's like, it's definitely not sexy.
It's definitely not for that.
You see a bunch of 60-year-old women that are tanned and leathered.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
That's crazy.
So yeah, there is a lot of factors involved in culture. And I mentioned too, like dance culture is a different mentality.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's lots of Christian girls that are in the dance community, and they have to wear certain things for costumes. And for some parents, they say, no, you can't be part of that. And other parents are like, that's religious. Well, why wouldn't I let my daughter live out her dreams? So every family really has to take stock of what is important and what are your values and the group identity that you are trying to instill in your family, church, or community.
Yeah. And it is a sacrifice. As someone who I typically dress obviously more modest than some others, it is hard to find modest clothes. There are really cute things I want to wear, and kind of like what I mentioned, like I have my friends and my sister, and if there's something I want to wear and it's like kind of borderline, I'm not sure, I take a picture, I send it to them, and if they say, no, that's inappropriate, I'm going to listen.
That's good.
Which sucks. I have to give up, like I really wanted to wear that dress. I thought it was very cute. But if my community around says that's not the best for you,
Right.
I'm going to, sorry, I'm not going to wear the dress.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that compromise isn't worth it.
Right.
To the rest of my heart, to my community, the people around me. I would be horrified if people came up to me and were like, I'm having a hard time being around you because of XYZ reason, whether it's the way you dress or the way you act or what you talk about or whatever. That's not fun.
Right.
I want to be the shining light in the room, that people love it when I walk in the room and always want to be around me. I think that's what everybody wants, to be loved.
That's right.
In that kind of way. And so it does take a sacrifice to die to certain things that you or may want in order to pursue righteousness, to pursue holiness, to pursue being set apart from the world.
Right. Yeah. Sure. And I think also women, back to insecurities, you gain a little weight and you're a little insecure, then you can dress differently. Like things fit different. You have to experiment differently. You have to try. And I think sometimes it's easy to lean toward, well, my shoulders and chest don't look fat.
Yeah.
And so things can get more revealing because you're trying to draw attention away from the trouble spots. And it can be a slippery slope to get into too. So also just throwing out there that we may not know that we have this insecurity until we like put on a few extra pounds, and then all of a sudden then it pops up and you never had this issue before.
Right.
So there's so many factors that really, but ultimately it's like having community to bounce things off of. Talk to your parents, talk to your leaders in your church, talk to your peers, like people that you appreciate their opinion, because it's so important to have feedback, right? We can't be isolated in our in this world, because we're going to be tempted. We're going to struggle with our flesh all the time.
100%. No, yeah. And even I, growing up, struggled with makeup specifically. I felt like I couldn't leave my room without putting it on. Like, I'm not going anywhere all day, right? But I felt like I had to put it on. And now I wear makeup and it's fine. But back then it was an issue of I'm only confident when XYZ happens.
Right.
So I've also heard very famously too, lots of people would say this, I can only be myself when I'm drinking around people in a social environment, right? If you need a substance or something, it can be food, it could be alcohol, it could be makeup, it can be clothes to make you feel confident.
Right.
There's an insecurity there that the Lord wants to deal with.
That's good.
Because I should feel confident whether I have makeup on or not, whatever environment I'm in, I am who he says I am. When I'm confident in that, it doesn't matter about anything else.
And I think it's just important to just remind everybody we all have insecurities.
100%. 100%.
None of us are living isolated and being confident completely 100% in how we look in our clothes or our makeup or our hairstyle or whatever it is. We're all in that boat. And I think that it's super important to know what resources we have available to deal with those insecurities. Like, it's okay to reach out for help if you're realizing, like, I think this is a problem for me. To get counseling or pastoral counseling or phone a friend. Just make sure that you're not living in a bubble isolated with this issue, and that you're honest about it and can talk to somebody freely about it.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't know it's there until the Lord brings it up or something happens and you realize, oh my gosh, I had no idea I was thinking this or having this thought process or doing this, and no idea there's an insecurity there, in which it is helpful to have strong, loving people around you to be like, hey, let's work through this. How can I help you? Let's ask some powerful questions. What's the truth?
Right.
What is the truth about who you are? That confidence. What is the truth? The truth is what the Lord says.
Right.
And so dealing with those lies and insecurities is a big deal.
It is. And I think that a lot of times young women are over-sexualized from a young age, and it can be something that they're so accustomed to that they're not even aware.
Yeah,
that
for sure.
Because also the culture affirms it, right? Or through TV and social media and
sex
whatever.
sells.
Right. And so I've encountered a lot of women in marriage counseling that, as they're getting older, they're realizing that their relationship was based on being over-sexualized. Like, there's a group of women that just feel like being pretty and being sexy is all their worth.
Yeah.
And then you start to get older and you realize, like, oh no, I don't have control over my age or how my
you get old.
Yes. That things sag and hormones change and you put on weight. And so all of a sudden then their whole world collapses because so there's like a whole segment of our population that deals with that is like completely identify with how they look and that's their whole identity and they can't function without looking pretty. And we got to move past that. And I know even I struggle with weight bouncing back and forth. I've been every size imaginable, but and I my thoughts are obsessive when it comes to how I look based on my weight. And like, I hate it. I hate having extra pounds on. I think every woman does.
Yep.
Oh,
and it's like constant. And I'm like, I'm appalled at how many times a day I think about it. Like, just stop being obsessive. And so sometimes it's like self-talk and like taking thoughts captive and making them obedient to Christ and like not letting those thoughts in and getting in the Word.
That's right.
Worshiping, like, getting a heavenly perspective of like, who am I?
Yeah, that's good.
How did God make me?
Yeah.
And does he say I am? And what am I called to do? And my purpose is far greater than how I appear, what I look like, or how I'm aging.
That's good.
Or not, if you're young and you're not aging yet. It's still the same.
Enjoy it.
Well, there's still things everyone can nitpick something about themselves that they don't like 100%.
Always,
that they hyperfixate on.
Well, I always think about, though, growing up, I remember those women that would walk into the room and that were elegant. I mean, they were, maybe smartly put together, just beautiful women, but they just glowed, right? They just had something about them. It was their spirit. It was just, there's a couple women in my life that I recognize. One of them is my Aunt Rhonda. I mean, she walks in a room and she's just light and she's gentle and she's not boisterous. I mean, although you can be boisterous and be just
fun
regal at the same time, but she just carries herself with such confidence. And I remember as a little girl always recognizing that. And I think if you think about it, all of us have those people in our lives.
Yeah.
And it's really going after those issues of the heart.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
There's Joe Rogan said on a podcast forever ago, but he's like, there's a difference between a hot woman and a beautiful woman. A hot woman is pretty to look at and it's out there and whatever, that's awesome. But then you could see a beautiful woman in like their 70s or 80s. Like an older woman, like surfacely is not hot, but you're like, you notice and you're attracted to it. Like, oh my gosh, there's something there.
Right.
Because that beauty is long lasting.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that reminds me of that quote from Captivating. I think it was Stacey Eldridge that said it, but I don't know. I think it's in the book Captivating. But she says, the most beautiful woman in the room is the most well-loved woman in the room. And I think that says so much. It's the power pack statement, right?
That's
because
right.
a well-loved woman is in a relationship where there's hard work and there's
That's good.
sacrifice and that there's an intentionality to love and to love well and to be strong and to not let the superficial things tear at the relationship and degrade it. So there's something to be said for the confidence that comes from that.
For
And whether
sure.
you're single or not,
Right.
like you're, you can't choose who your parents are. So if you aren't feeling well loved in your family of origin, you can choose your friends and you can choose your church
right.
community and
Yep.
you can choose to
Definitely.
be in a community that loves you well.
That's right.
So that brings out the best in you. And then that confidence is just a byproduct of being in a healthy culture.
Yep.
That's good.
Absolutely. No, I think that statement is very impactful. It's the well-loved piece. Because when
right,
you're well-loved, you're secure.
That's right.
Drives out all insecurity and fear. And then you can walk in the truth and confidence about who you are.
That's right.
I think that's what everyone, I think, strives for on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Is for that. And I had a revelation. I talked about it in my marked episode, but the Lord told me if you're constantly looking for the approval of people or you're waiting for them to give you the check mark, you'll be chasing after that the rest of your life.
Yes.
It will never be enough.
Never be enough.
And it feels good in the moment, but the minute someone says something,
right.
your whole world is destroyed.
Right.
Versus standing firm in what he says. Because that lasts forever.
That's right.
And I don't need to be constantly seeking that. I already have it. So
That's good.
so good.
anyways, anybody have any closing thoughts or anything? I think we
We covered all
talked
this.
about
Our preliminary discussion. We think we hit it
yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good conversation. I think it needs to be an ongoing conversation that we're talking about.
I think so.
Even with our friends, it's a good topic of, well, how do you guys feel about the way you're dressing? What are your standards? Everyone's may be different. That's between you and the Lord.
Right.
But I think it is a conversation, especially as we see things in the media. I feel personally things are getting a little bit more and more
Provocative.
a little bit more provocative, edgy, no real boundaries anymore. And that's very much celebrated as confidence. But I think this is something that we as Christians need to really be talking about because it can be sensitive.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we don't need to have these types of discussions and ask ourselves some hard questions
That's right.
too.
That's
and
right.
always
Yeah.
be checking our
right.
own hearts. So yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully we'll get a next one out here pretty quick too. But I do want to mention, if any of this stuff has stirred anything inside of you that you would like to talk about or discuss, you can go on our website and fill out, little question form thing. Or we also have Heather, who's our pastoral counselor, who I know would love to sit down and talk with you and help, maybe sift through some questions or insecurities you're having. She's amazing. She's helped me out a lot as well. So that's also on our website. I'm sure there'll be a link in the description. And so, yeah, we'll see you next time.